Hey everyone, it's Emily here, and today I wanted to take some time and finally address some misconceptions I keep seeing about modern physical game collecting. Specifically, cycled around new releases and how much data is actually on the physical disc or cart for many of these games. So with all the new information coming in about the Switch 2 and seemingly how a lot of third-party publishers are looking to opt for game key cards, where instead of having the game data on the cart itself, instead it's going to have an activation code and be basically a key fob of a digital game. Now, there's been understandably a lot of pushback regarding this practice, especially among physical media collectors like myself, but there's also some people chiming in that this is not a new practice. We've been seeing so many modern games where you basically have to download a game or be connected online somehow in order to play it. And people are kind of arguing that this is for every single new modern release out there, with no exceptions. Now, this statement is something I've seen well before the Switch 2 was ever officially announced. You see it a lot with the PS5 releases specifically, or at least in my experience, whenever I would talk about a PS5 game, which I think may stem from just a misconception of how the PS5 works. In order to achieve those really fast loading times and some other bonuses of modern physical gaming, while all the game data may be stored on the disc itself, you have to copy that data from the disc onto your PS5 hardware so that whenever you're playing the game, it's going to load data from the hardware itself and not the disc, which again is used as a way to boost loading times and other features that make the PS5 what it is. But that's not to say that every game is fully on the disc. We've seen plenty of examples, especially with big AAA titles, that need a ton of data to store on a physical disc. But a lot of publishers are opting not to fully put that data on a disc. We've seen this most recently with the Indiana Jones PS5 release, where they only stuck 20 gigabytes on the disc for this 100 gigabyte game. But I think because we've been seeing so many examples like this highlighted online of where the physical disc is basically an activation code, there's been a lot of misinformation and just misunderstanding of what the state of physical media is right now. Now, I'm going to make a rather bold statement here in saying that a majority of modern games are perfectly playable from the disc or cart, if you will, that require no online sort of connection or download patches in order to play them. Now, there are certainly caveats to this. There are plenty of games that post-launch have a lot of game-breaking bugs or just really poor optimization and kind of require a lot of post-hoc patches in order to run well. There are plenty of examples of this, especially in the AAA space, but a majority of games are not AAA. And the majority of physical media out there are not for just AAA games. So I wanted to kind of back up the statement with some facts. And I'm going to be using a website that I've talked about multiple times on this channel. It's called doesitplay.org. This website has definitely expanded since I think the last time I brought them up. And they've also incorporated a nice little area where you can visually see how many modern games are actually playable offline and also do not require download patches in order to play. So here is what the doesitplay.org website looks like. And you'll notice that you could search for any game using this bar here, and they also let you know what their latest reviews are of how the physical builds are for these games on the certain consoles. But the area that I wanted to discuss that supports my argument that most modern physical games are perfectly playable online and without patch downloads is in the statistics area on the right here. So there are two different pie charts. One that discusses the percentage of games that they've reviewed so far on the website. So as of now, this is 2,639 games across multiple different consoles. 93% of them you could play perfectly offline, meaning that there's no internet required in order to access these games to play them. With only 4% of them being no and 3% having this little caveat when it comes to a yes, but category. So that's a substantial number of games. I would say almost most games you could play offline is what this pie chart's telling me. Of course, there's some biases here of what games do they choose to review in order to include in this list. But overall, most of the games that they reviewed so far you can play offline. Now we're looking at the downloads required, meaning that these games require some sort of patch in order to get around some game-breaking bugs. Or with the yellow no asterisk category, this is most likely games that require extensive optimization and performance patches in order to play them. Despite that, though, we're looking at 74% of all the games reviewed so far do not require some sort of patch in order to play it. So they should be perfectly playable on the disc or the cart. And 14% of those also have that no caveat, but most likely some sort of patch would help the game performance-wise or something else. That leaves us with about 2% yes caveat and 10% totally yes, where a download patch is required. So these are games that probably had some sort of game-breaking bug or just unplayable without some sort of patch. But this still supports my argument, right? That a majority of games, and most of the games, I'll go through this list shortly, are all modern games that they reviewed. So let's look at the PS4 games. So this makes up 1,107 entries so far. We'll notice that 91% of them you can play offline, and 72% of them do not require a download patch, with an additional 16% that also doesn't require a download patch, but is probably worth downloading, especially if you want a better performance. Again, we're looking at a majority of games are perfectly playable as they released on launch. Let's go to the PS5. And here we only have 500 entries. Granted, there's not as many physical games out there, right, on the PS5 compared to the PS4, so this is understandable. But we're still looking at 93% you can play offline, and 70% don't require a patch, and 16% may be nice to have a patch, leaving us with about, say, 14% that do require a patch. Again, we're looking at a majority of these games are perfectly playable as they were launched with on that physical disc. So I've been highlighting a lot of PlayStation modern games. Unfortunately, when it comes to Xbox, so the Series X and One, there's less data on this. So if I click Series X here, you'll notice there's only 42 entries. I think this is mostly a preference that a lot of physical media collectors have moved away from Xbox due to having to hook up the console itself to online in order to play it. So that kind of defeats the purpose of having an offline game. If somehow the hardware gets corrupted or something, you're going to have some issues down the line with that potentially. Despite that, you could look at the list of games that they've reviewed so far. Of these 42, you can see how many you can play offline and how many do not require a patch. So this one is not a majority for download patch required, but it is kind of a slight majority if you include the no asterisks group. I'm going to Series X and One. This has 53 entries, so it looks a little bit better here with 100% of these games that you can play offline, and 62 of them do not require a download, and an additional 30% do not require a download, but you may want to. So not too shabby for these games. Now, if we go to Switch, they don't have that many entries on their website for Switch. There's only 551 entries, and we know that there are a ton of Nintendo Switch games out there. But of the ones that they reviewed so far, again, we have 97% of them you can play offline without any issues. And 80% of these do not require a download patch, with an additional 12% not requiring a download patch, but you may want it. So we're only looking at like about 6 or 8% that do require a download patch in order to play it. So I think the data speaks for itself. And if you think that maybe there's some cherry picking going on, there might be, but we're looking at a lot of numbers here, right? Over 2,000 games that we've, just in those modern hardware alone, that you have all these resources to look at individual titles to see if they're worth owning. Going back to the Switch, though, while doesn'tplay.org only has 551 reviews on their website so far, there's actually another resource that you could also look at to kind of have an understanding of what sort of build a lot of these physical game carts look like for the Nintendo Switch. So this is a resource that I've shared on my channel before, but this is also a great resource to understand what the Switch builds look like. And the unique thing about Nintendo Switch is that the physical game cart, a lot of these games see revisions during the production process. So whenever these games are reissued or reprinted, sometimes the patches that the launch editions required in order to play are actually on the physical game card itself when the next batch happens to be reprinted. You see this a lot with first-party Nintendo games. So if you look at column B here, you'll notice that there's a lot of different revision carts here. If you look at Animal Crossing, for example, you'll notice that it's in its 9th revision cart, meaning that if you buy the latest batch of Animal Crossing New Horizons and it happens to have this code on the back of this revision, on the physical game card itself, this means that it has all the way up to patch 1.8. It's not complete, which is why it's shaded in yellow here. So it's possible down the line we might see an additional revision to make this 10 in order to have all the patches available on the game card. But as of now, this hasn't been discovered in the wild. This list has a very active community. I think they have a Facebook page too, trying to hunt down these revision cards because they're not always obvious until you open the game up and flip on the backside what the revision number is. I'll have a video coming out, I think in the next few weeks, to really detail how to tell what your revision is on the Switch cart, and also take in the new code that they've adopted since last year of how to read these, since I kind of need a little update from the video I made on this topic before. But despite that, you'll notice that there's a ton of green games here that are fully patched on the cart, whether it was at launch, which you'll see for these games at the moment, or post-launch. If you go to, let's say, Xenoblade Chronicles 2, you'll see that it had its 6th revision, and right now it's fully on the cart in these different regions. You can also look at third parties and indies to see how all these are and what version is on the cart. These additional comments also make it helpful whether or not there's game-breaking bugs or something like that. You'll notice that there's not really any game-breaking bugs. Most of these are just additional content or performance patches, which you may or may not want, depending on the game. There's also been some testers of whether or not there's been major issues found. Like, for example, this contributor looked at BioShock the Collection and saw that a download was required in order to play it. So there's a lot of information here, as well as a list of games that have DRM, meaning that you have to be connected to the internet in order to play them. A lot of these are kind of obvious, right? Because they have online capabilities. And you could also find more information about this group if you wanted to help join the efforts, or just learn more about these cart revisions for the Nintendo Switch. But this is also, again, a great resource if you want to know more about how complete your Nintendo Switch games are. So as we continue navigating the world of modern physical game collecting, I think utilizing tools like doesitplay.org as well as the Nintendo Switch Revised list are really good ways to help vet what physical games you want to put into your collection, especially if you're interested in owning games that you could play offline and don't require a lot of patches in order to run them. So I'll provide links to both of those resources down below. So I hope this video helps spread some awareness about the state of modern physical game collecting. And it's not all bleak like some of the headlines like to make it out to be. And also maybe helping shed some light on how you would like to navigate the space and whether or not it's worth going through all this trouble in order to play some of these modern games. Overall, I think it's better to have awareness about the true state of things so that we're not just writing off modern physical games as obsolete and therefore helping kind of raise the standard of what we expect publishers should have. Because otherwise, I think many of them would just find it easier to go the key card route or just digital download only route when it comes to having access to games. And really, I think choice is better than no choice. And the longer we could keep physical gaming alive, I think the better it is for everyone. But that's all for me today. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. And until my next one, bye guys.